My name is Jason, and I'm a 52-year-old living in New York City. My wife, Lisa, who was 47 at the time we separated. We had been married for 20 years and shared a son, Chris, who's now 19 and studying in another city. I own a small business that does well enough to keep me comfortable. Emma and I met nearly 25 years ago in a bar in Manhattan. It was a random Friday night, and I was out with some friends, unwinding over a few drinks, when I noticed her across the room. There was something about her, an energy that just pulled me in. Gathering my courage, I walked over and struck up a conversation. We ended up talking for hours that night, and I was instantly drawn to her sharp intelligence and vibrant personality. She was a free spirit, someone who approached life with enthusiasm and charm. Not long after, we began dating, and our connection only deepened. A few years later, I proposed to her under a sprawling oak tree in Central Park. It was a picture-perfect moment, and when she said yes, I knew my life would never be the same. We married in a small ceremony, surrounded by the people who mattered most to us, and started building our life together. Financially, things were always stable. My business was thriving, and I ensured that my wife lived comfortably. Life in New York can be expensive, but I worked hard to provide her with the best, a lifestyle that many would consider luxurious. Most of Emma's friends were married to wealthy men and lived lives filled with indulgence and leisure. But those marriages didn't last. Many of her friends divorced within a few years, walking away with large alimony checks, and I couldn't help but notice a pattern. I never liked her friends. They struck me as shallow, and I often told Emma to keep her distance from them. There were nights when I had to pick her up from their parties, and I hated every moment of it. Some of her friends even crossed the line and tried to flirt with me, something I never told Emma about because I didn't want to create unnecessary conflict. She always assured me that her friends would never come between us, and I trusted her. Life went on. On Emma's 45th birthday, she decided to celebrate with her friends. I wanted us to spend the day together, but she insisted on going out, saying one of her friends was moving away, and they had planned a farewell. Reluctantly, I let her go, spending the evening at home nursing a bottle of Jack Daniels. Emma was active on social media, posting regularly and sharing her life with her followers. That night, she went live during her celebration. What I saw left me disgusted. Her friends brought out a cake shaped like a male organ, complete with an indecent amount of white icing on top. Emma, laughing and playing along, took a bite of the cake while her friends cheered her on. Later, they went to a male strip club, which she was also shared on her media stories. When Emma returned home, I confronted her. I told her that her behavior was inappropriate and humiliating, not just for me but also for our son, who could see everything online. I asked her about the strip club, and she claimed it was a surprise organized by her friends. I didn't let her off the hook. The surprise ended when you walked up to that door, I said. You chose to step inside. I made it clear how disappointed I was and reminded her that her actions didn't reflect those of a married woman. Her friends were all single. They didn't have the same commitments or responsibilities. She broke down crying, but I left her alone. That night, I couldn't bring myself to share our bed and slept in another room. The next morning, Emma didn't say a word to me and went straight to her gym. I buried myself in work at the office, but things between us were no longer the same. I had no idea how much worse it was about to get in the weeks that followed. After the fallout from Emma's birthday incident, I tried to mend things. A couple of days later, I asked her directly if she was holding a grudge over how I reacted. She looked at me with a smirk and said I was just jealous because I didn't have friends or exciting parties in my life. Her words stunned me. How could someone be so oblivious? I shot back, I don't go to strip clubs or indulge in disgusting antics with obscene cakes because I have some self-respect. That ended the conversation. I left for work, but the tension between us lingered. Although we eventually started talking again, things were far from normal. She threw herself deeper into social media, and her daily vlogs began gaining more attention. I decided it was best to stop watching them altogether. It only frustrated me further. When my birthday rolled around, I hoped for a fresh start. Chris, our son, joined us for a simple family dinner. While I was happy to have him there, she seemed more interested in engaging with her followers. Chris noticed and asked, "Dad, what's going on with her? She's barely paying attention." I shrugged, telling him she'd caught the social media bug. We laughed it off on the way home, but inside, I was seething. On the drive back, I pulled over on the side of the highway and asked Emma to step out of the car. She seemed confused but got out, immediately pointing her phone at the horizon to film the view. I couldn't hold back any longer. Taking her phone, I stopped the stream and told her firmly, "If you're spending time with your family, then be with your family. We deserve your attention, not your camera. If you can't respect that, don't bother showing up." She stood silently for a moment, then got back in the car without a word. She refused to discuss it further, and the gap between us widened. A year passed, and it was her birthday again. I wished her at midnight and gave her a diamond-studded gold bracelet. She thanked me with a kiss, but within minutes, she was dressed and out the door to meet her friends. When she came home late that night, drunk, I finally asked her, "Do I even mean anything to you anymore?" Of course, I wasn't expecting a meaningful answer, and I didn't get one. The next morning, I suggested we try couples therapy. "We can't keep going like this, Emma. If we don't work on things, this marriage won't survive," I told her. She brushed me off, grabbed her juice, and left for the gym without a second thought. That afternoon, Emma came home with her friends in tow. I couldn't hold it in anymore and asked her to come to the bedroom to talk. It was awkward with her friends there, but I needed answers. "Emma," I started, "what do you really want? Are you even willing to work on this relationship?" She sat down, crossed her arms, and said calmly, "I've been thinking about divorcing you for 2 years now. I'm at a point in my life where I want to start fresh." I was blindsided. "What are you talking about?" I demanded. She explained, "I want to live a new life. My friends are helping me figure it out." That was it. I lost it. "Your friends? Those old, lonely vultures who prey on rich men for money? Have you ever looked past the glitter and fake smiles? They're miserable, Emma, hiding their sadness behind their flashy lives. If that's the world you want, fine. But don't come crawling back when it spits you out. Those men out there will chew you up and leave you with nothing. And when that happens, don't expect me to care." The room went quiet. There was nothing left to say. The next day, Emma posted a social media where she revealed her plans. "I've been wanting this for 2 years," she said. "I don't know what's next, but I'm scared. Scared and excited. It's time to move forward." She called me repeatedly after that, saying she missed me and wanted to talk. I gave it one last try, asking her if she wanted to reconsider. "Once the papers are filed tomorrow, there's no turning back," I warned her. She hung up. A few weeks later, we were divorced. Emma moved out without saying goodbye. Our son took it hard but admitted he saw it coming. The day after the divorce was finalized, Emma posted, "I'm doing okay. It's like little pricks of light are finally breaking through the darkness. It's not much, but it's something. I'm moving forward." Then came another post. Days later, "Ladies, do your research. So many women are realizing we don't need men. We don't have to tolerate infidelity or abuse anymore. We're free to live our lives." And just like that, she introduced the new man in her life. A guy barely in his 20s with a chiseled body and six-pack abs. The caption read, "Here's to new beginnings." I shook my head. "Well, that's one way to spin the alimony," I muttered to myself. The day after my divorce was finalized, I threw myself into work. I knew Emma's antics weren't going to end anytime soon, but I was determined not to let them disrupt my life any further. Sure enough, the very next day, a new video of hers popped up. In it, she was crying, saying she had broken up with the young guy she had introduced as her new man just weeks before. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. I knew it wasn't going to last, but I was still taken aback by how quickly it had fallen apart. Later, a mutual friend shared the real story with me. Emma hadn't ended things with him. He had dumped her. Apparently, he woke up one morning and simply walked out. She was too embarrassed to admit the truth in her video. It wasn't long after that when I spotted her with another young guy. I had a meeting at a restaurant and saw them together across the room. This time, there wasn't any sting or sadness, just awkwardness. I stayed focused on my meeting and left as soon as it was done, making sure Emma didn't see me. A few days later, a friend sent me a video. The title was 40 and Naughty, and to my disbelief, it featured Emma dancing in her lingerie at some private party. At one point, she even took her top off while her friends cheered her on in the background. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I blocked that friend immediately. I didn't need that kind of negativity in my life. But Emma's social media exploits didn't stop there. A few days later, I stumbled upon another one of her posts. This time, she was standing by a pool in a bikini, posing and declaring, "This is what 47 looks like." To top it off, she shared her Tinder ID in the video. Out of morbid curiosity, I clicked the link, and there she was, nearly naked except for strategically placed patches of fabric. Not long after, Emma posted yet another video. She was out with another young guy, filming their time together. The guy looked visibly uncomfortable and pulled his hoodie over his head as soon as he realized he was in the frame. That was all the confirmation I needed. He wasn't interested in anything serious. He was just there for the fun, and it was obvious he'd be gone as soon as he got what he wanted. A few days later, another video surfaced. This one was different. Emma sat in front of the camera, looking lost and reflective. "I made a decision," she said, "and do I regret it? I don't know. Did I make a mess? I don't know. I guess it wasn't that bad, but today, I think my marriage wasn't bad. It was fine. Fine. My husband loved me, and I screwed it up. I'm a mess, and Jason warned me. I didn't listen. I just want my old life back. I've lost my husband, and now my friends aren't even with me anymore." Watching that video was surreal. It wasn't satisfying, nor did it bring me any closure. I had already moved on, but seeing Emma finally admit what I had known all along. Her choices were destructive, felt hollow. I turned it off and closed my laptop. I had no interest in watching her downward spiral play out. What would you have done if you were in my shoes? Should I forgive her if she came to me? Let us know in the comments. Emma showed up unannounced at my office one afternoon. I was surprised to see her and asked what brought her there. She hesitated for a moment before saying, "I want to come back home." I couldn't help but laugh. "Home?" I asked, shaking my head. "There is no home, Emma. I sold the house. Remember that fancy Nana pad you insisted on? I used the money to pay for that. There's nothing left to come back to." She looked taken aback but quickly asked, "Then can I come stay with you?" "Stay with me?" I repeated, chuckling again. "Emma, my bed is already taken. I share it with a loyal Saint Bernard who doesn't take kindly to strangers." She frowned. "I'm not a stranger," she said softly. "For him you are," I replied coldly. "And for me, there's no place for you in my life anymore. If my wife decides to step out and choose something other than me, it's over. I don't do second chances. I move on." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she left without another word. I didn't follow her. Instead, I went home to my dog, the only companion who had proven his loyalty through all of this. Over the next few days, I saw more of Emma's posts in social media. In one of them, she talked about her shattered illusions of the world and how hard it is for a woman her age to find love again. She lamented the challenges of dating in her late 40s, calling it unfair. But here's the thing, she was warned. She had everything. A family that loved her, a stable life, and a husband who was committed to her. Yet, she chose to chase something that was never meant for a married woman. She thought she could delay the responsibilities of marriage and family while exploring a fantasy, but life doesn't work that way. Fruit is meant to be enjoyed when it's ripe. If you wait too long, it spoils and rots. Nature has a way of teaching us lessons, and Emma ignored them all. Now, she's left with nothing. And me? I've moved on. I don't plan on marrying again. My focus now is on my son. Once Chris is ready to step into his place at the office, I'll transfer my assets to him and let him take the reins. For me, life is about soaking up the sunlight in the woods, enjoying the quiet moments, and being at peace. Life settled into a routine. I had my dog, my business, and the simplicity of quiet evenings spent in my backyard or hiking in the woods. For a time, I thought that was all I needed. After everything I had been through, the idea of letting someone else into my life felt like more trouble than it was worth. But life has a way of surprising you when you least expect it. It started with a charity event that my business sponsored. I wasn't particularly excited about attending. It was one of those black tie galas where everyone makes polite conversation, pretends to care about the cause, and secretly competes over who can donate the most. I was there for the networking and the free drinks. As I stood near the bar nursing a whiskey, I noticed her. She was standing by one of the silent auction tables, examining a painting with a curious tilt of her head. She wasn't trying to draw attention to herself, but there was something about her, a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need flashy clothes or loud laughter to announce its presence. I don't know what compelled me, but I walked over. Thinking about bidding? I asked, nodding toward the painting. She glanced at me with a smile that was both warm and amused. I was, but then I saw the price. A bit out of my budget for something that doesn't even match my living room. I chuckled. Fair enough. Art should at least match the couch, right? We started talking, and I quickly learned her name was Claire. She was in her early 40s, worked as a graphic designer, and had been dragged to the event by a friend who promised her it would be fun. Like me, she seemed a little out of place among the designer suits and champagne flutes. By the end of the night, we had exchanged numbers. I wasn't sure if anything would come of it, but for the first time in years, I felt a spark of excitement. Claire and I started seeing each other casually. At first, I was hesitant. After all, I hadn't dated in over 2 decades, and the thought of jumping back into the world of relationships felt daunting. But Claire made it easy. She wasn't demanding or overly complicated. She was just herself. We spent our first few dates exploring small, out-of-the-way spots in the city, cozy coffee shops, quiet parks, and the occasional art gallery. Claire had a way of making even the simplest moments feel special. One evening, as we sat on a bench overlooking the river, she turned to me and said, "You're different from most men I've met." Different how? I asked, curious. "You're grounded," she said, after a moment of thought. "You're not trying to impress anyone or prove anything." It's refreshing. I didn't know how to respond, so I just smiled. But her words stayed with me. A few months into our relationship, I decided it was time for Claire to meet Chris. My son was home from college for the weekend, and I thought it was important for him to see that I was moving forward with my life. Claire was nervous about the meeting, but I assured her it would go smoothly. And it did. Chris, ever the mature and thoughtful young man, treated her with kindness and respect. Over dinner, the three of us laughed and shared stories, and by the end of the night, I could tell that Chris approved. "Dad," he said later, as Claire stepped outside to take a phone call, "she's great. You deserve this." His words meant the world to me. Over the next year, Claire became an integral part of my life. She wasn't just a partner. She was a friend, a confidant, and a source of unwavering support. She accepted me for who I was, flaws and all, and never tried to change me. One afternoon, as we walked through the woods with my dog, I realized something. I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. The proposal wasn't extravagant or over the top. It happened in that same wooded trail, under a canopy of golden autumn leaves. "Claire," I said, stopping in my tracks. She turned to look at me, her eyes questioning. "I know this isn't the most romantic setting, but I need to ask you something." I pulled a small velvet box from my pocket and opened it to reveal a simple but elegant ring. "Will you marry me?" Her eyes filled with tears as she nodded. "Yes," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me. "Yes." We kept the wedding small, just family and a handful of close friends. It was held at a quaint chapel on the outskirts of the city, followed by a reception in a rustic barn decorated with fairy lights and wildflowers. When Claire walked down the aisle, I couldn't take my eyes off her. She looked radiant, her smile lighting up the entire room. In that moment, all the pain and heartache of the past felt like a distant memory. Married life with Claire was everything I had hoped for and more. We bought a cozy house on the edge of town, where we spent our evenings cooking together, sitting by the fire, or watching old movies. Claire brought a sense of peace and joy into my life that I hadn't felt in years. She reminded me of what it meant to love and be loved in return. Even my dog adored her, quickly adopting her as his second favorite human. As time went on, Claire and I built a life filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. We traveled, explored new hobbies, and supported each other's dreams. I also found a renewed sense of purpose in my work, mentoring my son as he prepared to take over the family business. Watching him grow into a capable and confident young man filled me with pride. And to you, dear reader, if you've made it this far, thank you for sticking with my story. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It would mean a lot.